Sign here, here, and here. The doctor's voice was clinical, detached, as he slid the commitment papers across the mahogany table. Once you sign, we can begin her treatment immediately. My brother Marcus didn't hesitate. His Mont-Blanc pen moved across the documents with practiced efficiency, like he'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. Beside him, my stepmother Victoria dabbed at her eyes with a designer handkerchief, performing grief she'd never actually felt. "This is for your own good, Lily," Marcus said, finally looking at me. I sat handcuffed to a chair in the corner of the conference room at Brookhaven Psychiatric Institute, 2 orderlies flanking me like I was some kind of dangerous criminal. "You've been having delusions. Paranoia. Dad's death affected you more than we realized." I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I kept my face perfectly blank, watching him sign away my freedom with the same pen our father had given him for his Harvard graduation. The irony wasn't lost on me. My name is Lily Richardson, and 6 hours ago, I was the sole heir to the Richardson pharmaceutical empire, a company worth $847 million. My father, James Richardson, had built it from nothing, and when he died 3 months ago from a sudden heart attack, he left everything to me. Not to Marcus, his stepson from Victoria's previous marriage. Not to Victoria, his wife of only 2 years. Just me, his only biological child. Now, according to the papers Marcus was signing, I was mentally incompetent. A danger to myself and others, suffering from acute psychosis and delusional disorder. The paranoia started after the funeral. Victoria explained to Dr. Bernard Moss, the psychiatrist Marcus had handpicked for this performance. Her voice trembled just enough to sound authentic. She accused us of poisoning James. Can you imagine? Her own family. Dr. Moss nodded sympathetically, making notes on his tablet. He was younger than I expected, maybe 45, with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses that gave him an air of intellectual authority. "Grief-induced psychosis is more common than people think," he said. "Especially in cases of sudden loss." I shifted in my chair, the handcuffs clinking against the metal frame. The sound made Victoria flinch dramatically, like I'd lunged at her. I hadn't moved more than an inch. "She tried to attack me last week," Marcus added, his voice heavy with manufactured concern. "Completely unprovoked. Started screaming about how we were trying to steal her inheritance. Our housekeeper had to pull her off me." That was a lie. I'd never touched Marcus, but I had confronted him in his office at Richardson Pharma, where I'd found him meeting with our family attorney and an investment banker, discussing the restructuring of company assets 2 weeks after Dad's funeral. When I demanded to know what they were planning, Marcus had called security. The housekeeper he mentioned? She'd quit the next day and moved to Florida. Convenient. "I understand this must be difficult," Dr. Moss said, turning to me with practiced empathy. "Lily, do you understand why you're here?" I met his eyes directly. "Because my family wants to steal my inheritance, and the easiest way to do that is to have me declared mentally incompetent." Victoria gasped. Marcus's jaw tightened. Dr. Moss just nodded, like I'd confirmed exactly what he expected to hear. "You see?" Marcus gestured at me. "The delusions are getting worse. She's been posting about us on social media, telling anyone who'll listen that we're criminals. It's embarrassing for the family, but more importantly, it's dangerous for her." The social media posts were real. I'd spent the last month documenting everything. The mysterious meetings, the documents I'd found in Marcus's office, the way Victoria had started wearing my mother's jewelry even though Dad had specifically left it to me in his will. But I'd been careful. Very careful. I'd posted everything on a private account, shared only with a select group of people I trusted. The fact that Marcus knew about them meant he'd been monitoring me. Probably for weeks. "The treatment plan is straightforward," Dr. Moss explained, closing his tablet. 72 hours of observation, followed by a comprehensive psychiatric evaluation. Depending on the results, we may recommend extended care. Extended care. That was code for indefinite commitment. Once I was locked in here, Marcus would have all the time he needed to dismantle Dad's will, redirect the inheritance, and erase me from the Richardson legacy entirely. What if I refused treatment? I asked, my voice calm, measured. Dr. Moss gave me a sad smile. The state of Massachusetts allows for involuntary commitment when a patient poses a danger to themselves or others. Your family has provided substantial evidence of your deteriorating mental state. The decision isn't yours to make, I'm afraid. I looked at Marcus then. Really looked at him. He was 42, tall and distinguished in his custom Tom Ford suit, his dark hair graying at the temples in a way that made him look trustworthy, presidential even. Women loved him. Business partners respected him. No one would ever believe that behind those sympathetic brown eyes lived someone capable of betraying his own sister. But I knew. I'd known for weeks. Ever since I found the life insurance policy he'd taken out on Dad 6 months before the heart attack. The same heart attack that the coroner had ruled natural causes. Despite my father being a marathon runner with perfect cholesterol and no family history of cardiac disease. I understand, I said quietly, slumping my shoulders in apparent defeat. I've been under a lot of stress. Maybe you're right. Maybe I do need help. The relief on Marcus's face was almost comical. Victoria actually smiled, dropping the grieving stepmother act for just a fraction of a second. Dr. Moss stood. That's a very mature attitude, Lily. Acceptance is the first step toward healing. As the orderlies unlocked my handcuffs and helped me to my feet, I caught Marcus exchanging a look with Victoria. They thought they'd won. Thought I'd broken. Thought the scared little girl who'd lost her father would just quietly disappear into a psychiatric ward while they carved up her inheritance like a Thanksgiving turkey. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly know, was that the iPhone tucked into my bra had been recording everything for the last 2 hours. Every word, every lie, every self-satisfied smirk. They also didn't know about the lawyer I'd hired 3 weeks ago. The one who specialized in inheritance fraud and had been collecting evidence of their conspiracy. Or the private investigator who was currently pulling my father's medical records and interviewing the paramedics who'd responded to his heart attack. And they definitely didn't know about the safety deposit box at First National Bank, containing copies of everything I'd found. The forged documents, the suspicious financial transfers, the email chain between Marcus and a pharmaceutical competitor discussing the sale of Richardson Pharma, the life insurance policy, and a USB drive containing security footage from Dad's house the night he died. As they led me down the hallway toward the psychiatric ward, my stepmother's Chanel perfume trailing behind us like a toxic cloud, I allowed myself the smallest smile. They'd committed me to steal my inheritance. But what they didn't know was that I'd recorded everything. And very soon, they were going to learn that the biggest mistake you can make isn't underestimating your enemy. It's giving them exactly the opportunity they need to destroy you. If this story is hitting close to home, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. The psychiatric ward doors closed behind me with a heavy metallic click, and somewhere in the distance I could hear Marcus and Victoria laughing. Let them laugh. In 72 hours, they'd be the ones behind locked doors. The room they assigned me was exactly what you'd expect from a $2,000 per day psychiatric facility. Sterile white walls, furniture bolted to the floor, a window with reinforced glass that didn't open, and a camera in the corner that blinked red every few seconds. I sat on the edge of the narrow bed, still wearing the clothes I'd been committed in. A cream cashmere sweater and tailored black pants that Victoria had probably already mentally cataloged for donation. My phone was gone. Confiscated during intake along with my jewelry, wallet, and belt. Standard protocol, they said. Safety precautions. But they'd missed something. During the intake search, the nurse had been thorough but not invasive. She checked my pockets, my shoes, even made me remove my earrings. What she hadn't done was ask me to remove the small digital recorder I'd tucked into the underwire of my bra during the drive to Brookhaven. It was no bigger than a tube of lipstick, but it could record continuously for 72 hours. I activated it with a subtle press through my sweater and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling tiles. The irony was almost poetic. Marcus had spent 3 months planning this, probably longer. He'd researched commitment laws, found a doctor willing to sign off on involuntary admission, coached Victoria on her performance, and fabricated evidence of my supposed mental breakdown. He'd thought of everything. Except that I was my father's daughter. James Richardson hadn't built a pharmaceutical empire by being naive.
He taught me to document everything, trust no one in business, and always have an insurance policy.
In this world, Lily, he'd told me on my 21st birthday, handing me my first shares in the company, the only thing more valuable than money is information.
And the only thing more powerful than information is proof.
I'd found Dad collapsed in his study 3 months ago. I'd been the one to call 911, the one who'd performed CPR until the paramedics arrived, the one who'd ridden in the ambulance watching his lips turn blue.
The official cause of death was acute myocardial infarction. Heart attack, clean, simple, unfortunate.
But Dad's cardiologist had seen him 2 weeks before and declared him in perfect health. His stress test had come back flawless. His cholesterol was lower than mine.
The night he died, he'd called me at 10 p.m., something he rarely did.
Lily, I need to talk to you about Marcus, he'd said, his voice strained.
I found something in the company financials. Something very wrong. Can you come by tomorrow morning?
And don't mention this to anyone. Not Victoria, not Marcus.
No one. He was dead by midnight.
The paramedics said he'd been deceased for at least 2 hours when I found him at 11:45 p.m., which meant he died around 9:45, approximately 15 minutes after having dinner with Victoria and Marcus. The same dinner where Victoria had insisted on opening a bottle of Dad's favorite wine, a 1982 Chateau Margaux worth $4,000. To celebrate family, I declined the invitation. I'd had a board meeting that ran late. That decision had probably saved my life. A knock on my door pulled me from the memory. Dr. Moss entered without waiting for permission, clipboard in hand, accompanied by a nurse whose name tag reads Sandra. How are you settling in, Lily?
Dr. Moss asked, taking the only chair in the room while Sandra remained standing by the door, her hand resting casually on her hip where I could see the outline of a panic button.
As well as can be expected for someone who's been kidnapped by her own family, I replied evenly. He made a note. You still believe your family is conspiring against you? I don't believe it. I know it. And what evidence do you have of this conspiracy? I almost told him. Almost explained about the financial discrepancies I'd found, the life insurance policy, the suspicious timing of Dad's death, the meetings Marcus had been taking with our competitors.
But I'd learned something important over the past 3 months. The truth doesn't matter if no one's willing to hear it.
Does it matter what evidence I have? I asked instead. You've already decided I'm delusional. That's why I'm here. Dr. Moss studied me for a long moment. Your brother mentioned you were very close to your father. His death must have been devastating. It was. Tell me about him. This felt like a trap, but I answered anyway. He was brilliant. Self-made. Built Richardson Pharmaceuticals from a single generic drug factory into a multi-million-dollar research company. He was demanding, sometimes difficult, but he was honest. He had integrity. Unlike your brother, there it was.
The real question.
Marcus isn't my brother, I said carefully. He's Victoria's son from her first marriage. Dad married her 2 years ago. Marcus has been living off Dad's generosity ever since, despite having a Stanford MBA and every opportunity to build something of his own. That must have created tension. You could say that. What I didn't say. Marcus had spent those 2 years slowly positioning himself as Dad's right hand, worming his way into board meetings, volunteering for projects, making himself indispensable while simultaneously undermining me at every turn. Missed messages, scheduling conflicts, subtle comments to board members about my inexperience despite my MBA from Wharton and 5 years of working my way up through every department of the company. Dad had seen through it eventually. That's what he'd wanted to tell me the night he died. Sandra's radio crackled. Dr. Moss, you have a call on line 3. He stood. We'll continue this later. Sandra will show you to the common room. I encourage you to participate in group activities. Isolation only reinforces delusional thinking. After they left, locking the door behind them, I waited exactly 5 minutes before retrieving the recorder from my bra and checking it. Still functioning. Battery at 94%. Perfect. I tucked it back and moved to the window. From the 3rd floor, I could see the parking lot. Marcus's black Mercedes was still there, parked in a visitor spot.
As I watched, he emerged from the building with Victoria, both of them laughing about something.
Victoria's hand rested possessively on Marcus's arm, and for just a moment their body language shifted into something that made my stomach turn. They weren't just conspirators.
They were lovers.
Of course they were. How had I missed it?
The way Victoria looked at him during family dinners, the private jokes, the times I'd walked into a room and found them standing just a little too close. Dad had been so besotted with his new wife that he'd been blind to what was happening right under his nose. His own wife was sleeping with his stepson, and together they'd murdered him for his money. My hands clenched against the window frame. The rage that swept through me was white-hot, volcanic. I wanted to scream, to break something, to storm down to that parking lot and expose them right there. Instead, I breathed, counted to 10. Let the fury settle into something colder, sharper. Rage was useless. Strategy was everything. Marcus's Mercedes pulled away, and I turned from the window.
The common room Sandra had mentioned would be my next stop. In facilities like this, information flowed through patients like water.
Someone would know something useful. Someone always did. I was escorted to a large, sunlit room filled with comfortable chairs, board games, and about a dozen patients in various states of awareness. Some were clearly medicated, staring vacantly at a television playing a cooking show. Others clustered in small groups, talking quietly. I chose a seat near the window, positioning myself to observe. First day, the voice came from my left. A woman, maybe 60, with sharp eyes and graying hair pulled back in a bun. She was working on a crossword puzzle, her pen moving confidently across the page. That obvious? You're still angry. Give it a few days. The medication smoothed out the edges. She smiled without humor.
I'm Ruth. Been here 6 weeks.
Lily, what are you in for? Ruth laughed, a dry, brittle sound. My daughter thinks I'm losing my memory. Keeps asking if I've taken my pills, eaten my meals, paid my bills.
What she really wants is for me to sign over power of attorney so she can sell my house and stick me in a nursing home.
But you're not losing your memory.
Not even a little bit.
I'm sharper than I've ever been. Ruth leaned closer, lowering her voice. But they keep me medicated anyway.
Haloperidol, 3 times a day. Makes me drowsy. Compliant. Easier to manage.
I filed that information away. How does someone get out of here?
Voluntary patients can leave anytime.
Involuntary commitments like us?
We need to be cleared by our attending physician. In my case, that's Dr. Moss. Same as you, I'm guessing.
He seems very thorough.
He's very expensive, Ruth corrected.
Families pay him to keep inconvenient relatives locked up.
I've seen 4 patients come and go since I arrived, all of them wealthy.
All of them fighting family members over money. Brookhaven isn't a hospital, sweetheart. It's a warehouse for people whose families want them to disappear. Before I could respond, Sandra appeared at my elbow. Lily, you have visitors. My pulse quickened. Who? Your brother and mother. Stepmother. I corrected automatically. The visiting room was smaller than I expected, separated by a plexiglass partition with a phone on each side, like a prison. Marcus sat on the other side, Victoria beside him, both of them wearing expressions of deep concern that didn't reach their eyes. I picked up the phone.
Marcus did the same.
How are you feeling? He asked. Like someone who's been imprisoned against her will. Victoria leaned toward his phone, her voice carrying through.
We're so worried about you, Lily. Dr. Moss says you're still having delusions. The only delusion here is thinking. You'll get away with this.
Marcus's concerned expression slipped for just a second, revealing something cold underneath.
Get away with what, exactly?
Taking care of my sister when she's clearly having a breakdown?
Stealing my inheritance. Murdering my father. He sighed, like I was a tiresome child.
This is exactly what Dr. Moss was talking about.
These paranoid fantasies. They're getting worse, not better. I know what you did, I said quietly. I know about the life insurance policy. The meetings with PharmaCorp. The wire transfers to the Cayman Islands. I know everything.
For just a moment, genuine fear flickered across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by pity. You see, Victoria? She's creating elaborate conspiracies from nothing. She needs help. I have proof. Really? Where? I smiled. Somewhere you'll never find it. And when I get out of here, I'm going straight to the police, the SAIC, and every news outlet in Boston. Richardson Pharmaceuticals will be front page news. The only question is whether you want to be remembered as a murderer or just a thief. Marcus stood abruptly. We're done here. I hope you get the help you need, Lily. For your own sake. They left, and through the plexiglass I watched them walk to the parking lot. This time, Marcus's arm was around Victoria's waist, pulling her close. She looked up at him, laughing, and he kissed her forehead. They thought I was neutralized, helpless, locked away where I couldn't hurt them. They had no idea that every visit, every conversation, every smug smile was being recorded. What Marcus didn't understand was that he hadn't trapped me in here with him. He'd trapped himself out there with the evidence I'd spent 3 months collecting. And the walls were already closing in. Dr. Moss prescribed medication on my second day. Haloperidol. 5 milligrams twice daily. The same drug Ruth had mentioned. Sandra delivered it with breakfast, watching carefully to ensure I swallowed. I did. Then, the moment she left, I walked to the bathroom and vomited it into the toilet. I'd researched haloperidol years ago when Richardson Pharmaceuticals had briefly considered manufacturing a generic version. It was an antipsychotic that caused drowsiness, cognitive dulling, and most importantly for Marcus's purposes, made patients appear genuinely mentally ill. Slurred speech, tremors, confusion. The perfect evidence to support a long-term commitment. I wasn't going to make it that easy. By day 3, Sandra commented on how well I was responding to treatment. You seem calmer, she observed during morning rounds. More cooperative. I gave her a drowsy smile, let my words slur just slightly. I think the medication is helping. Everything feels clearer. It was all performance. While I pretended to be medicated and compliant, I was actually spending every waking hour gathering evidence. The recorder in my bra had captured 2 more visits from Marcus and Victoria, 3 conversations with Dr. Moss, and a particularly damning discussion between 2 nurses about how the Richardson girl would probably be here for months because the family's paying top dollar to keep her quiet, but I needed more than recordings. I needed someone on the outside. The opportunity came on day 5, during what Brookhaven called supervised recreation time in the courtyard. Ruth sat beside me on a bench, both of us pretending to enjoy the weak October sunshine while orderlies watched from a distance. You're not taking your meds, Ruth said quietly, not looking at me. I kept my face neutral. What makes you say that? Because I'm not taking mine either. Been hiding them under my tongue for 2 weeks. She smiled. You get good at reading people in a place like this. The ones who are actually medicated have a certain look in their eyes. Distant. You don't have that look. I studied her more carefully. Ruth wasn't just sharp. She was strategic. Why are you telling me this? Because you're planning something. I can see it. Ruth pulled a cigarette from her pocket, even though smoking wasn't allowed. None of the orderlies moved to stop her. And because my daughter visits tomorrow. She thinks I'm too confused to notice she's been emptying my bank accounts. But I've been documenting everything. Every transaction, every forged signature, every lie. She took a drag. Problem is, I have no way to contact my real lawyer. The one my daughter doesn't know about. I understood immediately. You need someone to make a call. And you need someone who can move freely outside these walls. Ruth met my eyes. My daughter brings me things. Magazines, crossword puzzles. She doesn't check them very carefully. If someone gave her a package to deliver to me, she wouldn't think twice about it. What kind of package? Ruth's smile was sharp as broken glass. The kind that contains a cell phone. Untraceable. Prepaid. Small enough to hide in a crossword puzzle book. My pulse quickened. And in exchange? I make a call for you. To whoever you need to reach on the outside. I pretended to consider it, though we both knew I'd already decided. There's a lawyer. Daniel Chen. His office is on Newberry Street. I need him to know I'm here what Marcus did, and that he needs to file an emergency petition with the probate court to freeze all Richardson pharmaceutical assets until I can be evaluated by an independent psychiatrist.
Ruth nodded slowly.
Chun, Newberry Street. Emergency petition.
Freeze assets. She tapped her temple. I may be old, but my memory is perfect.
That's why my daughter wants me locked up.
How do I get you the phone? You have visitors, don't you?
That brother of yours comes like clockwork. Twice a week, according to Sandra's schedule. He does. Marcus's visits were designed to show Dr. Moss how much he cared,
how dedicated he was to my recovery. The perfect concerned sibling.
But they search everything we bring in. They search what comes through the front desk. But the courtyard has a perimeter fence.
20 feet from the oak tree to the property line. Ruth gestured subtly. Visitors park right there.
If someone were to drop something over the fence during a visit, and someone else were to retrieve it during recreation time, it was risky, but it could work. I'll need to get word to someone I trust, I said.
Someone who can buy a prepaid phone and make the drop. You'll figure it out.
Smart girl like you.
Ruth stood, stretching.
My daughter visits tomorrow at 2 p.m. If your people can make the drop by 1:30, I'll have the phone by 2:15.
Make your call by 3. That night I lay awake formulating the plan.
I needed to contact someone on the outside, but everyone Marcus knew about was off limits. My friends, my colleagues at Richardson Pharma, even my father's attorney, all potentially compromised or monitored.
Then I remembered. My father's driver, Thomas Grant, had worked for Dad for 15 years. He'd driven me to school, to college move-in day, to my first job interview. He'd been at the funeral, standing in the back, crying quietly. Dad had trusted him completely. More importantly, Marcus barely knew he existed. During breakfast, I approached Sandra. I'd like to make a phone call.
To let my apartment manager know I'll be away for a while. She hesitated. Dr. Moss prefers patients to limit outside contact during the initial observation period. It's just about my rent.
I don't want to lose my apartment.
I made my voice small, vulnerable.
Please?
Just 5 minutes? Sandra relented. 20 minutes later, I stood in a small alcove with a wall-mounted phone, Sandra watching from 10 feet away. I dialed my apartment, knowing Thomas sometimes checked on it for me while I was away.
He answered on the 3rd ring. Richardson residence. Thomas, it's Lily. I kept my voice steady, aware Sandra was listening. I'm calling about my apartment.
I need you to water my plants while I'm away. There was a pause. Thomas was smart enough to know I didn't have plants. Of course, Miss Lily. Where are you? Brookhaven.
The psychiatric facility in Newton. It's a voluntary stay. I lied, watching Sandra.
I just need some time to process Dad's death. I understand. His tone said he understood much more than my words.
How can I help with the plants? There's a specific fertilizer I need. It's called prepaid mobile. You can get it at any corner store. I need you to deliver it to the oak tree outside my window. Tomorrow, 1:30 p.m. Can you do that? Another pause. The oak tree. 1:30 p.m. Prepaid mobile fertilizer. Exactly. Just drop it over the fence by the oak tree. Someone will pick it up. Consider it done, Miss Lily.
Thank you, Thomas.
I appreciate you looking after things. I hung up.
Sandra made a note on her clipboard but didn't seem suspicious.
The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. At 1:25 p.m., I positioned myself in the courtyard near the oak tree, pretending to read. Ruth sat on a bench 20 feet away, working on a crossword. At exactly 1:30, a dark sedan pulled into the visitor parking lot. Thomas emerged, elderly and dignified in his driver's uniform. He walked to the fence, looked around casually, then bent down as if tying his shoe. A small package wrapped in brown paper arced over the fence, landing in the bushes near the oak tree. Thomas straightened and returned to his car. I waited 5 minutes, then walked over to examine the oak tree more closely, as if interested in its fall foliage. The package was exactly where he'd thrown it.
I palmed it, tucking it into my waistband beneath my sweater, and returned to my bench. 30 minutes later, Ruth's daughter arrived, a pinched-faced woman in her 40s carrying a bag from Barnes & Noble. I watched through the visiting room window as Ruth hugged her, taking the bag gratefully. 5 minutes after that, Ruth was back in the courtyard, a new crossword puzzle book in her hands. Our eyes met briefly. She nodded. At 3 p.m., during free time, Ruth knocked on my door. Want to work on puzzles together? We sat on my bed, the crossword book between us. Hidden in the spiral binding was a prepaid flip phone, small and basic.
5 minutes, Ruth whispered. That's all you get before they do room checks. I dialed Daniel Chun's office number from memory. His secretary answered. This is Lily Richardson.
I need to speak with Daniel immediately. It's an emergency. Miss Richardson, I'm sorry, but Mr. Chen is in a meeting. Tell him I'm being held at Brookhaven Psychiatric against my will.
Tell him Marcus Richardson had me committed to steal my inheritance. Tell him I have evidence, and I need him to file an emergency petition today. Now.
There was a sharp intake of breath.
Hold please. 30 seconds later, Daniel's voice came on the line.
Lily? My God, what's happening?
I spoke quickly, efficiently, outlining everything. The commitment, Marcus's conspiracy, Dad's suspicious death, the evidence I collected, the safety deposit box at First National.
I'm filing the petition within the hour, Daniel said.
But Lily, listen to me carefully. If Marcus finds out you've contacted me, he'll move up his timeline. Whatever he's planning, he'll accelerate it. I know.
That's why I need you to move fast. I'll have an independent psychiatrist there by tomorrow morning to evaluate you. Once they declare you competent, the commitment becomes illegal imprisonment. But until then, I keep recording everything. Be careful.
Desperate people do desperate things. I ended the call. Ruth took the phone and tucked it back into the crossword book.
Your lawyer sounds competent. He is, and Marcus is about to find out that committing me was the biggest mistake of his life. That evening, Marcus and Victoria made an unexpected visit.
I was escorted to the visiting room, where they sat on the other side of the plexiglass looking oddly pleased with themselves. Good news, Marcus said into the phone. Dr. Moss says you're responding well to treatment.
He thinks with a few more weeks, maybe a month, you'll be ready to transition to outpatient care.
A month, long enough for him to liquidate assets, transfer funds, sell the company.
That's wonderful,
I said, keeping my voice flat, medicated sounding.
I feel much better, clearer.
Victoria leaned in.
We've been thinking about your future, Lily. When you're released, it might be best if you live somewhere less stressful. Maybe a small apartment. Something manageable.
We could set up a trust fund. Make sure you're taken care of.
Translation. They'd keep me on an allowance, dependent and controlled, while they spent my inheritance.
That sounds nice, I said dreamily.
I'm tired of making decisions anyway. They exchanged satisfied glances. I was playing my part perfectly, the medicated broken sister who'd given up fighting.
We're so glad you're being reasonable, Marcus said.
Dad would want us to take care of you. The mention of our father made rage spike through me, but I kept my face serene.
I know.
Thank you for everything you're doing. After they left, I returned to my room and activated the recorder. Their entire conversation was captured, including Victoria's barely concealed excitement about my small apartment and Marcus's relief that I was finally being
cooperative. They had no idea that tomorrow morning, an independent psychiatrist would arrive.
They had no idea Daniel Chen was filing emergency petitions with the probate court. They had no idea every visit, every smug smile, every condescending word was being documented. And they had absolutely no idea that the security footage I'd hidden in that safety deposit box showed Victoria grinding something into Dad's wine glass the night he died, while Marcus kept him distracted with conversation about a new business opportunity. I sat on my bed, the recorder pressed against my chest, and smiled in the darkness. Tomorrow the walls would start closing in. And this time, Marcus and Victoria would be the ones trapped inside. Dr. Patricia Williams arrived at Brookhaven at 9 a.m. on day 7, unannounced and unscheduled. She was everything Dr. Moss wasn't. A woman in her 60s with kind eyes, impeccable credentials from Johns Hopkins, and a reputation for exposing fraudulent psychiatric commitments that had earned her the nickname the Liberator in legal circles.
Daniel Chen had chosen well. I was in the common room when Sandra came to get me, her expression confused.
Lily, there's another doctor here to see you. Dr. Williams? She says she's been court-ordered to perform an independent evaluation. I kept my face neutral, but my heart hammered with anticipation. Okay. Dr. Williams conducted the evaluation in a private room, no cameras, just the two of us.
She spent 3 hours with me, running cognitive tests,
asking detailed questions about my family, my father's death, and the events leading to my commitment.
I answered truthfully, completely, holding nothing back.
When I finished, Dr. Williams set down her pen and looked at me with something like fury in her eyes.
You're not mentally ill, Miss Richardson. You're not delusional, psychotic, or a danger to yourself or others. What you are is a victim of false imprisonment.
Can you get me out of here? I'm filing my report with the court today. You'll be released by this evening. She paused. But I need to warn you. The moment Dr. Moss realizes what's happening, he'll contact your brother.
They'll know their plan has failed. Good. Let them panic. Dr. Williams smiled grimly.
Your lawyer mentioned you have evidence? I retrieved the recorder from my bra and placed it on the table between us.
7 days of recordings. Every visit, every conversation with Dr. Moss, every word Marcus and Victoria said, including their admission that they're keeping me here to steal my inheritance. May I?
I pressed play. Dr. Williams listened to 3 minutes of Marcus explaining to Dr. Moss how important it was to keep me under observation for
at least another month, and how the family would be extremely grateful for his discretion and expertise. Her face hardened. Dr. Moss will lose his license for this. I'll make sure of it personally. I have more than recordings. I told her about the safety deposit box, the security footage, the life insurance policy, the financial irregularities, everything. Your brother and stepmother aren't just thieves, Dr. Williams said quietly. If that footage shows what you say it shows, they're murderers. I know. She stood. I'm calling the police. Right now. This facility will be surrounded before your brother even knows I filed my report.
Wait. I placed a hand on her arm. I need to see Marcus and Victoria first. One last time. Face to face. Before the police arrive. Dr. Williams studied me. Why?
Because I want them to know it was me. I want them to understand that they didn't lose because they were caught.
They lost because I beat them. She considered this, then nodded.
I'll give you 2 hours.
But after that, I'm making the call whether you're ready or not. I contacted Daniel Chen from Dr. Williams's phone.
I need you to call Marcus. Tell him there's an emergency with the company.
Something that requires my signature on legal documents. Tell him he needs to bring the papers here to Brookhaven today.
Make it sound urgent.
He won't fall for it. He will.
Because he thinks I'm medicated and compliant. He thinks he's won. Arrogance makes people stupid. Daniel made the call.
I listened on speaker as he explained to Marcus that the ISEC was requesting documentation on a Richardson Pharma merger from 3 years ago. And as the heir,
Lily's signature was legally required.
Can't it wait until she's released? Marcus asked, irritation clear in his voice.
The SAIC deadline is today at 5 p.m. If we miss it, they'll freeze all company assets pending investigation.
I could practically hear Marcus's mental calculations. Frozen assets would ruin his plans to liquidate and transfer funds.
Fine. I'll be there in an hour. He arrived in 45 minutes, Victoria in tow. Both of them looked annoyed at the inconvenience. Dr. Moss met them in the lobby, his expression confused.
I wasn't informed about any legal documents needing signatures, he said. Marcus waved him off.
It's a corporate matter. We just need 5 minutes with Lily. They were escorted to the visiting room.
I was already waiting on my side of the plexiglass, but this time Dr. Williams sat beside me, and Daniel Chen stood behind Marcus and Victoria.
Marcus's confident expression faltered when he saw the lawyer. What's going on?
I picked up the phone. Marcus did the same. Automatically.
Hello, brother. His eyes narrowed. Something in my tone, in my posture had changed. I wasn't the drowsy, defeated woman from our last visit. Where are the documents? He asked carefully. There are no documents. There's no SEC deadline. There's just you, me, and the truth.
Victoria leaned toward the phone. Lily, what are you talking about? I smiled. I'm talking about the fact that I know everything. I know about the life insurance policy you took out on Dad 6 months before he died. I know about your affair with Marcus. I know about the meetings with PharmaCorp to sell Richardson Pharmaceuticals. And I know what you put in Dad's wine the night you killed him. The color drained from Victoria's face.
Marcus's hand tightened on the phone until his knuckles went white.
You're insane, Marcus said, but his voice shook. Am I? Dr. Williams, would you like to weigh in? Dr. Williams leaned toward my phone.
I'm Dr. Patricia Williams, and I've just completed a comprehensive psychiatric evaluation of Miss Richardson. She's completely sane, mentally competent, and has been illegally imprisoned.
I filed a report with the court declaring her commitment fraudulent. Marcus stood abruptly.
This is ridiculous. Dr. Moss, you assured me. Sit down, Marcus. My voice cut through his panic like a blade. We're not done. Something in my tone made him sink back into his chair.
For 7 days you visited me. Told me how much you care.
Explained how you're only trying to help. Do you want to know what I was doing while you performed your concerned brother routine? I pulled out the recorder and held it up to the plexiglass.
I was recording. Every single word. Victoria's hand flew to her mouth.
Marcus's face went from pale to crimson.
Every conversation with Dr. Moss about keeping me here. Every admission about stealing my inheritance.
Every smug comment about how I was finally being cooperative. All of it documented. I leaned closer to the glass. But that's not even the best part. I nodded to Daniel, who pulled out his tablet and turned it toward them. On the screen, security footage began to play. The timestamp read 3 months ago, the night of Dad's death. The camera showed the Richardson Mansion dining room. Dad, Marcus, and Victoria sat at the table, wine glasses in front of them.
Marcus was talking, animated, keeping Dad's attention focused on him.
Behind them, Victoria stood at the sideboard, her back to the camera. Her hand moved to her pocket, retrieved something small, and then hovered over Dad's wine glass for just a second. No, Victoria whispered. The footage continued.
Victoria returned to the table, smiling.
Dad drank his wine, laughing at something Marcus said. 20 minutes later, he excused himself to his study. The footage jumped to the study camera, showing Dad collapsing at his desk, clutching his chest.
That security system Dad installed?
I said quietly. The one he never told you about because he didn't trust you? It's been recording everything for 2 years. Every room. Every conversation.
Every murder. Marcus lunged at the plexiglass like he could reach through it and strangle me.
Guards materialized, pulling him back.
You bitch! You have no idea what you've done.
I know exactly what I've done. I've destroyed you. Victoria was crying now, mascara streaming down her face. We didn't mean to kill him. It was supposed to just make him sick, weak enough that he'd sign over power of attorney. Victoria, shut up! Marcus shouted, but she couldn't stop. The confession poured out of her in a rush. We needed the money.
Marcus's debts. The investments that failed. We just needed time to fix it. But James wouldn't listen.
He found out about the embezzlement, was going to cut Marcus off completely. We didn't have a choice. You always have a choice, I said. You chose murder. You chose to kill a good man who gave you everything. And you chose to lock me up when I got too close to the truth. Daniel stepped forward.
Miss Richardson has provided the district attorney's office with substantial evidence of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit fraud, embezzlement, and false imprisonment. Warrants have been issued for your arrest. As if on cue, the visiting room doors opened.
Police officers entered, hands on their weapons. Marcus Richardson, Victoria Richardson, you're under arrest for the murder of James Richardson and the unlawful imprisonment of Lily Richardson. What happened next was chaos. Victoria collapsed, sobbing. Marcus fought the officers, screaming about lawyers and lawsuits and defamation. Dr. Moss tried to slip away but was stopped by a detective who informed him he was also being charged as an accessory.
I watched it all through the plexiglass, my face calm, my heart steady. Marcus's eyes found mine one last time as they cuffed him. How? He asked. How did you do it?
Dad taught me. He said the only thing more valuable than money is information.
And the only thing more powerful than information is proof. I pressed my hand against the glass. You underestimated me because I'm younger. Because I'm a woman.
Because I love Dad too much to be ruthless. But you forgot something important.
What?
I'm James Richardson's daughter.
And we don't lose.
They dragged him away, still screaming.
Victoria went quietly.
Broken and defeated, Dr. Moss maintained his dignity until they mentioned he'd be charged with running an illegal imprisonment scheme that had affected dozens of
patients over the years. Then he too crumbled. If you're watching this and you've ever been underestimated, ever been betrayed by people who should have protected you, subscribe to this channel.
Because this story proves that patience, strategy, and evidence will always beat arrogance and greed. Dr. Williams placed a hand on my shoulder. How do you feel? I thought about it.
Empty. Relieved. Tired. That's normal.
You've been running on adrenaline and rage for 3 months. What happens now? Now you go home. You take control of your father's company. You live your life. She smiled.
And you make sure their trial is as public and humiliating as possible.
I was released 2 hours later. Thomas was waiting in the parking lot with the car, his eyes red from crying. Miss Lily. Thank God you're safe. Thanks to you, Thomas. That phone you dropped over the fence saved my life. As we drove away from Brookhaven, I looked back at the building one last time.
Somewhere inside, Ruth was probably working on a crossword puzzle, waiting for her own liberation, now that Dr. Moss's scheme had been exposed.
I made a mental note to hire the best lawyer in Boston for her case. My phone returned during checkout, buzzed with notifications. News outlets were already running the story. Pharmaceutical heiress imprisoned by family and murder cover-up. Richardson empire crumbles as heir exposes. Murder plot. The woman they tried to silence speaks. Marcus and Victoria's faces were on every screen, being led into police cars in handcuffs. The Richardson Pharmaceutical Board had called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. Daniel had scheduled a press conference for the afternoon, but all of that could wait. Tonight, I just wanted to go home. The trial lasted 6 weeks and became the most watched courtroom drama in Massachusetts history. Every major network covered it. Every detail of Marcus and Victoria's conspiracy was dissected by legal analysts, true crime podcasts, and social media.
The prosecution's case was devastating because I'd given them everything they needed. Recordings,
security footage, financial documents, testimony from the private investigator who'd interviewed the paramedics, and a toxicology report that confirmed traces of digitalis in my father's system, a drug that mimics heart attack symptoms and metabolizes quickly.
Victoria's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal.
Marcus refused, convinced he could talk his way out of it. His arrogance lasted exactly until the jury saw the security footage of Victoria poisoning Dad's wine while Marcus distracted him.
The verdict came back after only 4 hours of deliberation.
Marcus Richardson, guilty of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, embezzlement, fraud,
and false imprisonment. Sentence: life in prison without possibility of parole.
Victoria Richardson, guilty of first-degree murder,
conspiracy to commit murder, and accessory to fraud. Sentence: life in prison without possibility of parole. Dr. Bernard Moss, guilty of conspiracy to commit false imprisonment, medical fraud, and racketeering. Sentence: 25 years in federal prison, permanent revocation of medical license.
I sat in the front row for every day of the trial, wearing my father's favorite color, navy blue. I wanted Marcus to see me. Wanted him to know that the sister he'd underestimated, the woman he'd tried to erase, had destroyed him completely. The day the verdict was read, Marcus turned to look at me one final time. His expensive suit hung loose on his frame.
Prison had aged him 10 years in 6 weeks. The confident, charismatic man who'd charmed his way into my father's life was gone,
replaced by a hollow shell who finally understood what it meant to lose everything. I hope you're happy, he said as they led him away in chains. I'm not happy, I replied. But I'm free. And you never will be again.
Victoria didn't look at me at all. She'd stopped speaking entirely after her confession in the visiting room, as if she'd used up all her words and had nothing left to say. Her lawyer told reporters she'd attempted suicide twice in custody. I felt nothing when I heard that. Not satisfaction, not pity.
Just emptiness where my stepmother used to exist in my consciousness. The aftermath moved quickly.
Richardson Pharmaceuticals' board of directors held an emergency meeting 3 days after my release from Brookhaven. I walked into that conference room as the majority shareholder and walked out as CEO. Some board members had supported
Marcus during the conspiracy. They resigned within the week, knowing what I had planned for them. Others, the ones who'd been loyal to my father, welcomed me with relief. Your father would be proud, said Robert Chun, our CFO and Daniel's uncle, who'd worked with Dad for 20 years. You have his strength and his principles. Within 6 months, I'd restructured the entire company. The embezzled funds Marcus had hidden in offshore accounts were recovered and reinvested in research and development. The corrupt executives he'd installed were replaced with people who'd actually earned their positions. The deal with PharmaCorp that would have sold Richardson Pharma for parts was terminated, costing Marcus's co-conspirators millions. Under my leadership, Richardson Pharmaceutical didn't just survive the scandal. We thrived. Our stock price increased 40% in the first year. We launched 2 breakthrough medications for cardiac care, a fitting tribute to my father. And I established the James Richardson Foundation for corporate ethics and whistleblower protection.
But the victory I treasured most had nothing to do with business.
2 months after the trial, I walked into Brookhaven Psychiatric Institute, not as a prisoner but as a visitor. Ruth was waiting in the common room, still working on her crossword puzzles. I heard you won, she said, smiling. We both did. After Dr. Moss's arrest, investigators had examined every patient at Brookhaven. Ruth's case was one of 37 fraudulent commitments. Her daughter had been charged with elder abuse and fraud. Ruth's assets were unfrozen, her power of attorney revoked, and she was released into her own care with a full apology from the state. I bought a house in Vermont, Ruth told me. Small, quiet, exactly what I wanted. My daughter can rot in the same cell block as your stepmother for all I care. I'd hired Ruth's real lawyer, paid all her legal fees, and made sure her daughter's conviction was as public as Marcus and Victoria's. It was the least I could do for the woman who'd helped save my life. What will you do now? I asked. Ruth's smile was wicked. I'm writing a book. How I outsmarted my greedy daughter and the doctor who tried to steal my life. Already got a publisher interested. I'll buy the first copy. We stayed in touch. Ruth became something like the grandmother I'd never had, sharp and irreverent and unimpressed by wealth or status. She attended Richardson Pharma's annual galas, always arriving with outrageous stories about her Vermont neighbors and unsolicited advice about my love life. Thomas remained my driver, though I gave him the title of Chief of Personal Security and tripled his salary. He'd risked his job and possibly his freedom to help me when I needed it most. Loyalty like that was priceless. Daniel Chen became Richardson Pharma's general counsel. His quick action and strategic thinking had saved not just my inheritance but my life. And Dr. Patricia Williams joined the board of the James Richardson Foundation, where she continued her work exposing fraudulent psychiatric commitments and medical abuse. The people who'd tried to destroy me had inadvertently surrounded me with the strongest team I could have asked for. 2 years after the trial, I stood in my father's study in the Richardson mansion. I'd kept the house, though I'd gutted every room Victoria had decorated and restored it to the way Dad had loved it. His desk, his books, his photographs of my mother, all returned to their proper places. On the wall hung a framed newspaper article. Richardson Heir transforms tragedy into triumph. Below it, my father's favorite quote, the one he'd had engraved on his desk. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. I'd continued. Through grief, through betrayal, through imprisonment and rage and the darkest moments of my life, I'd continued. My phone rang. It was the district attorney. Miss Richardson, I wanted to inform you personally. Marcus Richardson was involved in an altercation at the prison last night, another inmate. He's in the hospital wing now. Stable but with significant injuries. I should have felt something.
Satisfaction, perhaps, or vindication.
Instead, I felt only tired.
Thank you for letting me know. There's something else. Victoria Richardson has been placed on suicide watch again.
She's not adjusting well to incarceration. I understand. After I hung up, I walked to the window overlooking the garden where my father used to read on Sunday mornings. The autumn leaves were turning, painting the grounds in gold and crimson. Marcus and Victoria were suffering. Dr. Moss was suffering.
They're co-conspirators, the ones who'd helped them embezzle funds and cover up murder, were serving their own sentences. Justice had been served thoroughly and completely.
But their suffering didn't bring my father back. It didn't erase the 3 months I'd spent believing he died of natural causes, or the 7 days I'd spent imprisoned, or the moment I'd realized my own family had murdered him for money. What it did do was prove that truth, documentation, and strategic patience would always defeat arrogance and greed. My assistant buzzed through on the intercom. "Miss Richardson, the Forbes reporter is here for your interview." Forbes was running a cover story.
The heiress who refused to be silenced. They wanted to know how I'd survived.
How I'd planned my counterattack, what advice I had for other people facing family betrayal or corporate conspiracy. I tell them the same thing my father had taught me. Document everything,
Trust selectively, and never underestimate the power of staying calm when everyone expects you to break.
I tell them that the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies.
It's succeeding so spectacularly that their betrayal becomes the footnote in your success story.
I tell them that Marcus and Victoria had tried to bury me, but they'd forgotten that seeds grow when buried.
They'd forgotten that pressure creates diamonds. They'd forgotten that the daughter of James Richardson had inherited more than money. She'd inherited steel. The interview went well. The reporter asked predictable questions about the trial, the company's recovery, my plans for the future.
But the last question surprised me.
Do you ever wish things had turned out differently?
That your family hadn't betrayed you? I considered this carefully.
I wish my father was still alive.
I wish Marcus and Victoria had chosen integrity over greed.
But do I wish I'd never been tested?
No, that experience showed me exactly who I am and what I'm capable of. It taught me that I don't need family who shares my blood. I need family who shares my values. And what would you say to someone facing similar betrayal right now? I'd say document everything. Trust your instincts. Build your evidence quietly. And when you're ready to strike, strike so decisively that your enemies never recover. I paused.
But most importantly, remember that living well isn't just the best revenge.
It's the only revenge that matters. Everything else is just noise.
The article published 3 weeks later.
The same week, Marcus lost his first appeal and Victoria was transferred to a maximum security facility after her third suicide attempt failed. Richardson Pharmaceutical announced record profits.
Ruth's book became a bestseller. And I stood on the balcony of my father's study,
looking out at an empire I'd saved and a future I'd built from the ashes of betrayal, and realized something profound.
They'd tried to destroy me because they thought I was weak. They'd been wrong. And their mistake had cost them everything.
5 years after my father's death, I visited his grave for the first time since the trial.
I'd avoided it, unable to face the reality of his absence while fighting for justice. But now, with Marcus and Victoria permanently imprisoned, the company thriving, and my life fully reclaimed, I could finally say goodbye properly.
"We won, Dad," I whispered, placing white roses on his headstone.
"They tried to steal everything you built, but I got it back."
All of it. The wind rustled through the cemetery trees, and for just a moment,
I swear I felt his presence beside me, proud and protective, the way he'd been my entire life.
"I miss you every day.
But I promise you this. Richardson Pharmaceutical will stand for another 100 years. Your legacy is safe, and your daughter."
I smiled through tears. "Your daughter is exactly who you raised her to be. Strong, strategic, and absolutely unstoppable." I walked away from that grave knowing my father could finally rest in peace. His murderers were paying for their crimes. His company was in hands that honored his vision.
And his daughter had learned the most important lesson of all. The people who try to bury you don't realize they're actually planting you.
And when you rise stronger than they ever imagined possible. Moral of the story. They thought imprisoning me would silence me. Instead, it gave me exactly what I needed. Time to plan, evidence to collect, and the cold clarity that comes from having absolutely nothing left to lose.
Marcus learned that underestimating someone because they're younger, because they're grieving, because they trusted you, is the fastest path to your own destruction.
Victoria learned that murder for money only works if you're smarter than your victim's children. And I learned that the best revenge isn't emotional. It's methodical, documented, and absolutely devastating. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been betrayed by people who underestimated you, remember this. Your enemy's biggest mistake is thinking that breaking you will stop you. It won't. It will forge you into something they can't fight, can't manipulate, and can't defeat. So document everything. Build your case. Strike when you're ready. And when they finally realize what you've done, make sure they understand one thing clearly. You didn't win because you got lucky. You won because you were always 3 steps ahead. And they never saw you coming.